My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. All right. We are talking about the quote, redemption of creation, unquote, of Romans chapter 8, which occurs at the time of the resurrection. Now look, I don't know of anybody that denies that connection. Revelation chapter 20, 10 and following is the time of the resurrection, right? Followed immediately by, in other words, the resurrection ushers in the new heaven and new earth, the new creation, the new Jerusalem. It's that simple, it's that undeniable. So when we talk about the new heaven and new earth, as foretold by the Old Testament prophets, even though, for instance, even though Isaiah chapter 51 does not explicitly mention the resurrection, by talking about the passing of heaven and earth and the creation of a heaven and earth, it is implicitly discussing resurrection. Theologically, you can't talk about the new heaven and the new earth without talking about inclusively the resurrection. You know, I'm somewhat amazed at times when people say, well, okay, I agree that the Lord came at AD 70. I agree judgment happened at AD 70, but not the resurrection. Folks, those all go together in the eschatological discussion, in the narrative. So anyway, I've shared with you over the last couple of videos Isaiah chapter 51. God called on Israel to look to Abraham and his promises. Those promises were given and they were seen far off. But don't forget, Jesus said, Abraham longed to see my day, and he saw it and he was glad. John 8:51 and following. So Abraham saw it far off, which was Jesus' day, 1900 years. Yeah, that's a long time. Isaiah foresaw a city, a country, and resurrection. Hebrews chapter 11, 13 to 16, 11:35. So here in Isaiah 51, in which the discussion is the Abrahamic promise, the promise is the passing of the old creation, Isaiah 51, 5 and following, at the time of the giving of a new covenant. Now, oh my goodness. I've already shown you, God said he was going to give the new covenant, the covenant of righteousness, the covenant of justice, a covenant of salvation, when heaven and earth would pass away. Notice now, God calls on Israel. And in Isaiah 51, 15 and following, he says this, I am the Lord your God, who divided the sea, whose waves roared. The Lord of hosts is his name. Now watch. I have put my words in your mouth. I have covered you with the shadow of my hand. Watch this. That. Now in the Septuagint, the word that it would be haina, which means in order that. So let me read that again. I have put my words in your mouth. I've covered you with the shadow of my wings in order that I may plant the heavens, lay the foundation of the earth, and say to Zion, you are my people. What? Did you catch the power of that? I put my word on your lips. I covered you with the shadow of my hand in order to create heaven and earth. Folks, this is covenant creation. Or if you want to use the term, covenantal creation, or creation by covenant, however you wish to express it. Now, some say that God was looking back at what he did at Sinai. I once took that position. But in the Septuagint, these are in the future tenses. In other words, God says, I will put my words in your mouth, being a reference back to the giving of the new covenant. Okay, either way, let's consider this very, very quickly here. If it is a reference back to Sinai, when God gave Israel the covenant, what would it mean? It would mean that when God gave Israel Torah at Sinai, he planted the heavens and established the earth. He didn't create literal, physical heaven and earth at Sinai. No, he created Israel as a covenant people. So if Isaiah 51 is looking back at what God did at Sinai, which I don't think will work, because notice, he said, I gave you my word in order to say to Zion, you are my people. Well, Zion is Jerusalem. So, the second alternative is, as pointed out, in the Septuagint, these are future tenses. I will put my word in your mouth. Well, if that's talking about the new covenant that he had already mentioned in Isaiah chapter 51, verse 4 and following, a law shall go forth from my lips. It will be a law of justice, a law of salvation, a law of righteousness that will never be destroyed. Okay? So if the future tense is applicable, it's talking about the giving of the new covenant to the new covenant people to create the new heaven and the new earth and the new Jerusalem. Remember, he talked about the Abrahamic promise. What was the promise to Abraham? Heavenly city, heavenly country, resurrection. Either way you want to look at it here, folks, it is the creation of heaven and earth by giving of the law. Either the law of Moses or the law of Christ. Either way, take your choice. The future tenses work better, and the fact that it's referring to Zion, which in Messianic prophecy, Zion is the new Jerusalem that comes down from God out of heaven for God to dwell with man. Revelation 21, 1-3. But do you see the power of this? Here is a promise of the destruction of heaven and earth at the time of the giving of covenant. As we will see when we go to Isaiah chapter 65, God would destroy the old covenant world of Israel in order to create the new heaven and the new earth of Messiah, the heavenly Zion. But you see, the bottom line here is, there is no way to make this a reference to literal, physical creation. Now look, if the giving of the law, either Torah or the gospel, is for the laying of the foundation of the earth, of the heavens and the earth, then that means that the destruction of the heaven and earth that's already been discussed is not talking about literal creation. At what point of time are we supposed to believe that God would give a law to create literal, physical, new heaven and new earth? Which means, by the way, have you thought about this? If the creation of this heaven and earth of Isaiah 51, 15 and 16 is at the time of the literal, material, physical creation, and the creation of literal material creation, then God doesn't give the new law, the new covenant, until the destruction of physical heaven and earth. And the creation of, now remember, here's the giving of the law to create heaven and earth. So if Isaiah 51 is talking about a literal physical heaven and earth, new creation, then the new covenant that would create that heaven and earth, that new covenant has been made, or else there's yet another new covenant to be made. Do we really want to take that position? No, we don't. I sure hope you catch the power of what we've shared with you this morning. It is awesome. And we've got more. So we'll see you on the flip side.